get started here, I was asked to, like I said before in sacrament meeting, I had this calling to my previous ward, and for some reason, I've just started falling into enjoying doing preparedness, different preparedness aspects. And so I was asked today to give a class on an introduction to becoming temporarily prepared. I realize we're all at different levels of our journey on being temporarily prepared, but I'm just kind of starting with the basics and going through. So to start off, I just want to ask the question, how much do you know about emergency preparedness? And we're going to start off with a little fun quiz to test your knowledge. I'll read the questions, and then if anyone will just pipe in and give an answer, I'd appreciate that. And at any time, if you have any questions or you want to throw in some comments, please do. So let me get to the next screen here. Okay, so what do you think? Question number 1. As long as a thunderstorm is 5 miles away or farther from you, you are pretty safe from lightning strikes. Is that true or false? Anyone?
False.
False, correct. Okay, question 2. When an earthquake strikes, you should run outside to avoid falling building debris, take cover under a heavy piece of furniture, panic, lean against an inside wall or stand under an inside doorway, or B and or D?
B and D.
Correct. Excellent. Okay, question 3. What is the minimum amount of water that you need to store for one adult for 2 weeks? 5 gallons, 10 gallons, 14 gallons, or 21 gallons?
5 gallons.
Not correct. And
14.
14 gallons. That's 1 gallon per person per day.
Wow.
And then I'll explain a little bit more on that later on. Question 4. Which areas of the United States are vulnerable to earthquakes? The West Coast, particularly California, the Eastern Seaboard, the Central United States, all 50 states.
We're very inclusive.
What's that?
All.
That's right. All 50 states are vulnerable to earthquakes. Question 5. What's the most common disaster that occurs in the United States? Fire, flood, earthquake, or tornado?
I would say flood.
Okay. The answer is fire. And then 6, small games and a teddy bear can be very important to keep in your 72-hour kit. True or false?
True.
That's right. Don't have to be a kid to want to hug a teddy bear. All right, 7. How often should you practice your emergency evacuation plan? Once a year, every 6 months, or every 3 months?
Amy says B.
Okay, the answer is C, every 3 months. All right, so Bishop W. Christopher Waddell, first counselor in the presiding bishopric, just reminded us in this past general conference the importance of preparedness by saying the following. If someone could please read this screen. Anyone?
Terry, I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you.
From the beginning of time, the Lord has provided direction to help his people prepare spiritually and temporally against the calamities and trials that he knows will come as a part of this mortal experience. These calamities may be personal or general in nature, but the Lord's guidance will provide protection and support to the extent that we heed and act upon his counsel.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a wonderful example in the scriptures in the book of Genesis of Joseph in Egypt and his inspired interpretation of Pharaoh's dream. We all know the story. Hold on just a sec. God shows Pharaoh what he's about to do, but Pharaoh needs Joseph to interpret his dream for him, and there were to be 7 years of plenty throughout all of Egypt, and then would come 7 years of famine. So Pharaoh immediately set about preparing for what was to come, and the scriptures then record the following. If someone will please read this screen.
Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay.
And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls, and he gathered up all the food for the 7 years, of the 7 years. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea until he left numbering, for it was without number. 7 years of dearth began to come according as Joseph had said, and that dearth was in all the lands, and in all the land of Egypt there was bread.
Okay. So when considering the principles of preparedness, we can look back to Joseph in Egypt for inspiration. Bishop Waddell goes on to say, knowing what would happen would not have been sufficient to carry them through the lean years without a degree of sacrifice during the years of abundance. Rather than consume all that Pharaoh's subjects could produce, limits were established and followed, providing sufficient for their immediate as well as their future needs. It was not enough to know that challenging times would come. They had to act, and because of their effort, there was bread. So then also we could then next step to church history teaches us many lessons about preparedness. In the 2001 Ensign article entitled Sturdy Shoes and a Waterproof Tent, it's one of my all-time favorite ever articles on preparedness, and it's an extremely insightful read. There's not enough time to delve into each scenario that's presented in this article, so I highly recommend that you go and read that. One that is especially poignant is in which the Missouri riverboat, the Saludo, blows up, killing nearly 24 Latter-day Saints traveling from St. Louis to Council Bluffs on their way west to Utah. And one passenger's story of ignoring warnings from the Holy Spirit to stay off the vessel is profound. So I'll leave you with that cliffhanger, and you really ought to go look at that. So one of the scenarios I want to cover is that lessons from crossing the plains. And I really want you to just ponder on how we can apply their situations to our families if we're not prepared. So lesson 1, when crossing the plains, when we ignore preparedness counsel, we can expect unhappy consequences. When the saints were leaving Nauvoo, the church published lists on what they were supposed to gather and take, but when the first companies left in February of 1846, people panicked. They crossed the Mississippi River without proper clothes, food, or shelter, so they then brought suffering upon themselves and then drained the resources from those that were prepared. Lesson 2, protect against nature. Infants and elderly were the highest death toll counts along the trail. Wagon covers and tents weren't waterproof. People would lose hats, thus bringing about severe sunburns. They dressed for the summer heat and then lacked coats and gloves for the cold mountain temperatures. They had to guard against snakes and wolves and swarms of mosquitoes, both for themselves and their livestock and the horses. Lesson 3, be accident cautious. The pioneers lamented carelessness of losing hats, binoculars, knives, axes, guns, watches, pans, horses, and cattle. Parents would be so busy that children would wander away and they wouldn't realize it. And so then some would have to stay back and look for their children or would hold up the wagon train. Lesson 4, we should protect ourselves from uncaring or dishonest individuals. The pioneers had to learn to guard against theft, assault, kidnapping. They had to enforce basic rules of conduct and expel those who would not cooperate. They learned they had to tune out complainers, whiners, and doomsayers. Lesson 5, they had to protect against discouragement. They had to work to maintain their health so they would not become overly exhausted, because then that would lead to sickness and bad judgment. So to keep their spirits up, they would make friends with their fellow travelers. They held dances. They sang songs. They helped with repairs of wagons, and they took care of those that were sick. Lesson 6, be creative and adaptive in difficult times. The women would take advantage of the bumpy wagons and fill tubs with water and soap and dirty clothes, and the laundry would get jostled all along the trail, and at day's end, they would have clean laundry. And then others would put cream in containers and hang them underneath the wagon and let it jostle and churn into butter. So the next experience I want to share is from the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire. It's totally applicable to our day and age and our times. So I want you all to contemplate back to when we had the earthquake last year. We had it in Idaho. You guys had one here in Utah. So at the time, there were about 120 branch members, missionaries, and city visitors who were in the city there, and they wrote how they survived the quake. Their accounts identify several problems we could face if caught in a major earthquake and provide us with several preparedness ideas. So, lesson number 1, have sturdy shoes and durable clothing nearby in case of a sudden nighttime emergency, whether at home or away from home. In 1906, the quake struck before morning while people were still sleeping, and frightened people ran into the streets in their night clothes and bare feet. The mission president, Joseph Robinson, hiked all over San Francisco trying to locate and help church members. Broken bricks and glass quickly shredded his shoes. Lesson 2, have fire extinguishers in our homes. Less than 4 blocks away from the mission home, a woman was cooking breakfast and accidentally started a fire. The firemen were too busy to respond to this ham and eggs fire, so by early afternoon, in order to keep the fire from spreading, the firemen had to dynamite the area where the mission home stood. Lesson 3, have emergency water on hand in sturdy non-glass containers. The faucets went dry when the water mains broke. Thirsty people broke into stores and bars to find liquid. Thirsty members who flocked to the mission home were glad to be offered bottled fruit. Lesson 4, have minimal cleaning items such as towelettes, toothpaste, deodorant, face towels, and even small bags of detergent. It was a real trial, said missionary elder Leo Gardner, bound for the Pacific Islands, to endure our thirst and go without washing our faces and hands, which were getting blacker with the dust and smoke. All right, lesson 5. Have emergency food as we have been taught. San Franciscans rushed to local markets to buy up bread, creating panic buying. We all know about that. By noon, as fires spread through the city, martial law was declared, and anyone trying to enter stores, even store owners, were shot on sight as looters. Within a day or two, the city provided bread for people who stood in bread lines that were 4 people wide and blocks long. Lesson 6, it is important to have 2 or 3 meeting places where family members can find each other in case disaster strikes and the family is scattered. President Robinson's toughest task for about a week was reuniting families separated during the disaster. Evacuations had become necessary, and with homes damaged and the church's mission home dynamited to create a fire break, the members all scattered. President Robinson tried to let members know where other members were camped out by posting a sign in the mission home ashes indicating where the main camp was located. Lesson 7, be prepared to leave your cherished belongings. People stated that people started grabbing heavy things or things that they just felt they couldn't live without. So one was carrying a trunk that weighed a ton, and another person pushed a wheeled sewing machine along. Others strapped belongings to bicycles. Too burdened, they had to leave belongings alongside the road. Lesson 8, ignore wild rumors that spread in panics and don't pass them on. The earthquake severed the city's communications with the outside world, so rumors spread that Los Angeles was destroyed, New York was no more, and the Great Salt Lake had poured into Salt Lake City. All right. Which then leads us to that of Ildevon J. Featherstone. He gave a superb talk in General Conference on food storage. He remembers the effects that strikes, earthquakes, and rumors of war had on many very active Latter-day Saints. If someone would be willing to pipe in and read this quote, please.
I can read it.
Thank you.
Like the 5 foolish virgins, they rushed to the store to buy food. caught in the panic of knowing that direction had been given by the prophet, but not having followed that direction, fearful that maybe they had procrastinated until it was everlastingly too late. How foolish we can sometimes be. We have a living prophet. We have God's living oracles. Let us follow the brethren and be constant. We need have no fear if we are prepared.
Whoops. So, where do we start? In October 2002, President Gordon B. Hinckley suggested that church members adopt a simpler approach to home storage. If someone could read this screen, please. Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. We can begin ever so modestly. We can begin with a 1 week's food supply and gradually build it to a month and then to 3 months. So we all can be inspired from this. We all can benefit from this Lord's inspired program. And so the church leaders re-examined their approach to self-reliance. So you can go on the church website and find the pamphlet, All is Safely Gathered In, Family Home Storage, that simplifies this process. Basically what it says is to build a supply, gradually build a small supply of food that is part of your normal daily diet until it's sufficient for 3 months. Then you're to store drinking water. Now, it's recommended by the government and other organizations that we have at least 14 gallons of water per person for 2 weeks. But in all reality, you should have 36.5 gallons per person. So you'll have enough for drinking, hygiene and sanitation, dishwashing and food prep, bathing, and some laundry. So I'll give you more information about that in a future class. And then next, we're to establish a financial reserve by setting aside a little money each week and gradually increase it to a reasonable amount. And then once we've done those things, once families have achieved these objectives, they're counseled to expand their efforts as circumstances allow into a supply of long-term basic foods such as grains, legumes, and other staples that you can use to stay alive. Anyone want to read this screen?
Amy will.
This new program is within everyone's grasp. The first step is to begin. The second is to continue. It doesn't matter how fast we get there so much as that we begin and continue according to our abilities. Bishop Burton.
Okay, thank you. So then Elder Featherstone once again suggests 4 things we can do. First, start by taking an inventory. Take a physical count of all your reserves, regardless of how little that you have. Just imagine how the powerful testimony you bear concerning a living prophet must sound to your children who know that as a family head, you've been counseled for years to have a year's reserve of food on hand. We need to know where we are. Every family should take an inventory and get all the facts. Then he next says, decide what is needed to bring your present reserve levels to a year's supply. Then make a list and prepare a plan. Then third, work out a time schedule for when you will reach your goal. 1 year from your date, you ought to have a year's supply of food in all active and many less active members' homes in the church. Plant gardens, fruit trees, raise rabbits or chickens. Do all you can within the laws of your community. Fourth, follow the prophet.
Going, Clarky.
Yeah, do we have a few people that have chickens in their backyard? That's awesome. We used to raise chickens also. Fourth, follow the prophet. This year, don't just think about it, do it. Grow all the food you possibly can. Remember to buy a year's supply of garden seeds so that in case of shortage, you will have them for the following spring. I don't know, did anybody have a problem buying some seeds last year? I know I ordered some seeds online in February, and it took me 2 months to get them because the seed company said they had a record-breaking year for people growing gardens in 2020. Everybody was home and learned how to garden. Okay. Let's see, then. All right, so if someone could read this, please.
We will see the day when we will live on what we produce. President Marion G. Romney.
Yep. Do you think we're getting close to that? I think we are, and there's a lot to do it. Yes, I can plant a garden, but I have a tendency to get started late, and so I'm getting my seeds already started from Home Depot or wherever and coming and putting them in the ground. So it'd be beneficial for me to know how to actually get them to grow from the seed, or use heirloom seeds so that I know how to save seeds from what I produce and can save them for the next year. So it's kind of scary to think if we don't know how to produce anything, what are we going to eat? And maybe gardening isn't your thing, but so maybe you have to think of a simpler way. You can do them in containers, or maybe you're just going to buy a lot of extra food that's already in cans, something like that. We all have different situations, and we all just need to do what works for us. Okay, then on this next slide, the most common question we often get is, well, how am I supposed to get extra money for these things? Or, I agree with all of this, but I'm barely making ends meet. And I totally get it. Believe me, for 20 years, my husband served in the military, and we lived on a really tight military income. We had 5 children, and so we get it on budgets being tight. We're all in different levels of where we are. But I promise you, because I can testify without a doubt, if you have a desire, you will find a way, because that's what we did. And as I'm going to state probably again, is that usually your grocery budget is the number one thing in which you can make some adjustments and you have some flexibility. So, but Elder Featherstone, and what I'm going to share next is all from him. Okay, all his comments, anything I say is from him. So if you get offended, it's not me. You can be offended with President Elder Featherstone. So this is what he suggests: where to find the money for building your food storage. Number 1, decide as a family this year that 25 or 50% of your Christmas will be spent on a year's supply. He says, many families in the church spend considerable sums of money for Christmas. Half or a part of these Christmas monies will go a long way towards purchasing the basics. Point 2, when you desire new clothes, don't buy them. Repair and mend or make your wardrobe last a few months longer. Use that money for the food basics. Point 3, cut the amount of money you spend on recreation by 50%. Do fun things that do not require money outlay, but make more lasting impressions on your children. Point 4, decide as a family that there will be no vacation or holiday next year unless you have your year's supply. Sit down and work this out as a family. He says, many church members could buy a full year's supply of the basics from what they would save by not taking a vacation. Take the vacation time and work on a family garden, be together, and it can be just as much fun. Now, you may argue with that point, but that's what he said. Point 5, if you haven't a year's supply yet and you do have boats, snowmobiles, campers, or other luxury possessions, sell or trade 1 or 2 or more of them and get your year's supply. Point 6, watch for advertised specials in the grocery stores and pick up a few extras. And point 7, I'm so nervous, sorry. Change the mix in your family's diet. Get your protein from sources less expensive than meat. The grocery bill is one bill that can be cut. Every time you enter the store and feel tempted by effective and honest merchandising to buy cookies, candy, ice cream, non-food items, or magazines, don't. Think carefully. Buy only the essentials. Then figure out what you have saved and spend it on grains, legumes, sugar, honey, salt, etc. Okay, if someone would please read this from President Monson.
I will.
Okay.
Many more people could ride out the storm-tossed waves in their economic lives if they had their supply of food and were debt-free. Today, we find that many have followed this counsel in reverse. They have at least a year's supply of debt and are food free.
Okay, that was President Monson in 2001. So then that leads us to our goals as a Crescent Sixth Ward and the Draper City, which I'm extremely impressed with their desire to be emergency and have emergency preparedness goals. So it's been discussed and within the ward that our goals for right now are that each family have an evacuation plan with a grab and go list, and also to have 72-hour bags. In February, probably on the 11th, the Thursday, so just coming up in a couple weeks, I'm going to hold a class in the Relief Society room. We'll be all distanced and have masks and everything, but it will be on an evacuation plan and 72-hour bags, and I will give you handouts and for a plan on formulating that for your family and a list of what to grab and go if you have 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes and so forth. So that will be at 7 o'clock on February 11th at the church. And then we want everyone to get a 3 months worth of food. It's really easier than you realize, and I'm going to hold a class in that in late March, and with simple meal plans on how to make this happen and how to gather that food. Okay. So in the meantime, in the ward newsletter was posted a handout on how to obtain a year's supply of food of long-term food storage. Now it's just getting 6 months for this year, and then next year we'll get the next 6 months. And I spread it out like that so that trying to hit everybody's scenario, that hopefully it would be more cost effective. If you're already along this journey and you want to get it all at once, go ahead and buy it all at once. You would just double the amounts. But if you read and look at that file that was attached, that is, let's see here. That is the amount for one adult. Okay, so let me see here. Let's see. So it's for one adult. So you're just going to take how many people are in your family and times that, the quantities. So if you follow this layout for this 2021, you will have food for one adult, or you have a 3 month supply for 2 people, or a 2 month supply for 3 people, or a 6 week supply for 4 people. Okay. So if you need, because something is better than nothing. All right. I even have a layout for college students that even if you just wanted to follow that, it gives you basic ingredients of what would get you through a semester of food. Then you at least have something on hand. And I promise you, if you at least do something, you will have greater peace of mind. So, and then hopefully in the future in the newsletter, we'll just have posted a breakdown for each month of what you should be working on. And then if you've already got your food storage or you need something else to work on, don't want to leave anybody out, then there are some suggested bonus challenges that you can work on. Okay. So in closing, you may phone call me, text me, email me. I will help in any way any of you want. There's no judgment here. I will meet you where you're at, okay? If you don't know where you're gonna store it, if you're in a small apartment, I'll help in any way except buy your food for you. Unless, and just help you get going, okay? So that you can have some peace of mind. The church can't take care of us all. We've been told to take care of ourselves first. And so by doing so, it takes a lot of pressure off our bishopric, knowing that the ward members are helping themselves because there's a lot to take care of, not just us as ward members, but everybody within the ward boundaries. Okay. And then by doing this, I promise you that if we just get going we'll strengthen our ward unit, then we'll strengthen our stake in Zion. And that's really our ultimate goal there, is to be a strong stake in Zion. So In closing, I just want to read this last quote from referring back to Bishop Waddell. In a never-changing world, we must prepare for uncertainties. Even with better days ahead, we know that the temporal peaks and valleys of mortality will continue. As we seek to become temporally prepared, we can face the trials of life with increased confidence, and like Joseph in Egypt, we will be able to say, even in stressful circumstances, there was bread. And if you don't know how to make bread, I'll give you an easy recipe and we'll teach you how to make bread. If you don't want to learn how to make bread, or you are gluten intolerant or whatever, everyone's going to have to adapt this to your situation. There's a lot of food allergies out there nowadays. And so that's why it all has to be customized for each and every one of us. But I'm just willing to help anybody. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. In closing, I just want to share my testimony that I know these principles are true. We are so richly blessed to belong to the gospel of Jesus Christ, in which our leaders are inspired. We can learn from past lessons, from past ancestors and pioneers and the scriptures, and they're trying to guide us and help us so we're prepared today. And so that we can have better peace of mind. And it's not just about food, it's all different scenarios, knowing how to have communications. In fact, the entire state of Utah on April 15th will be having a ham radio broadcast in connecting with, and so there's a rep from our ward. Every ward will be tuning in to make sure all the connections work. So, for communication aspect. And so you're really blessed to live in an area where people care and want to do these things. Back in the day, before the year 2000, we lived in Alabama, and the world was going to end with the Y2K, and my girlfriend and I had to travel to Atlanta, Georgia to get our food storage. We were military families, tight income. We brought food back. My husband started throwing a paper out so we could, in the morning, so that we could have extra money to buy on food storage. And she and I would can our food storage in our little homes. And we didn't care if it was sitting in the middle of our living room floor. All our children were small at that time. And all little kids know is that their tummy hurts when they're hungry, and they don't get it when things are short. So we were just getting it and just having it there. And so that's what kind of started us on pursuing this more, learning how to do things. I've learned how to make wheat meat out of wheat. There's just so much. We are so blessed. We can get our proteins from beans and legumes. We're so blessed to be part of this church. And I want you to know that, once again, I'm willing to help in any way. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.